Welcome to the Cohort Sisters podcast, where we give voice to the stories, struggles, and successes of Black women and non binary people with doctoral degrees. I'm your host, Dr. Ija McCullough, and today we have Dr. FeLisa Albert-Wisses, a seasoned professional with over 20-year journey blending her passions for health and education. A racial equity consultant, Black health and wellness practitioner, educator, and mentor, Dr. FeLisa champions critical consciousness, emphasizing race as a social construct. Her work delves into the personal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural dimensions of racial inequities with a special focus on understanding their impact on the quality of our lives. Beyond her role as a senior faculty and an academic success coach, Dr. Felisa's commitment extends to disrupting systemic racism in education. As the founder and CEO of Well Equity Partners, she re examined her purpose during the pandemic, aiming her to utilize her skills for conscious living and soul healing, particularly within Black communities. Dr. Felisa's work is grounded in creating meaningful partnerships and fostering open, honest conversations about race, education, and well being. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Felisa.
Thank you so much. I love to sit and hear my own introduction. And I think we have to get comfortable when we hear the things about ourselves. So it feels good. So it means that it's right. But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. There's so many pieces of your work and your interests that very much align with mine. So I'm excited for this conversation. But before we get into your work, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where are you currently? And what are some of the things that you'd like to do when you're not working?
Okay. So I am from Boston, Mass. So I live in an urban city, Dorchester. Um, what I like to do, I like to get into that. I love to cook. I'm a homebody.
Okay.
I'm a professional at resting. um
Mm,
and self-care. Like I love to, if I'm going to rest, right, I got to do the whole self-care routine, the candle, the pajamas, the no phone, like
yeah.
snacks, and just chill out. I'm a tea person, so I love my
Okay.
teacup, and all that good stuff. So I'm good at resting and relaxing.
Nice. Okay, since you mentioned you're a tea person, I have to ask, are you like a loose tea person or are you a tea bag person? Because I feel like there's some tea snobs, and I just want to know, how far are you into being a tea person?
So let me be honest, as I raise my hand, I am a tea snob. The tea
Okay.
has brewed at a specific temperature based off
Okay.
of the kind of tea, right? So black tea,
Okay.
green, it gets brewed differently. If I do tea bags, they're always organic bags to make sure there's no plastic
Mm,
or anything inside of the tea bag. But I also like
okay.
loose. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm a connoisseur, but I am a tea snob. Yeah.
Okay. I knew about the different temperatures. I had never really heard anyone talk about the tea bag and plastic. So you just put me onto something. So I appreciate
Yes.
that.
You're
So
welcome.
clearly, you are interested and passionate about health and well being, especially in the Black community. How did you become interested in the field of public health?
My journey. So I started off thinking I was going to be a lawyer because I'm the
Okay.
person that always has a voice, want to speak for the voiceless. And then I got pregnant with my son. I had him at 20. And then I went to my first doctor's appointment and it wasn't good. They was looking at me
Mm,
as if I was another statistic.
yeah.
Um, all the biases that come with being, black and young and female. And I just remembered in that moment, that was the last time I was going to ever feel like I wasn't worthy enough or having a negative bias on me and you don't even know me. So I remember in that appointment, I said, listen, you're going to change your body language and you're going to sit there, you're going to answer my questions. And when I'm done, that's when this meeting is over. And in that moment, I knew that I'm still being a lawyer, kind of, but I
Mm,
did the
yeah.
switch. And so that's how I started my journey in healthcare. I continued on, whether I started off as a medical assistant, worked my way up to being a nurse. I
Mhm.
thought I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. And then at
Okay.
that point, I was just like, I don't know. I don't know if this is really what I'm supposed to do. And so I knew as a young Black woman that my voice mattered, but I also knew that the credentials behind this
Mhm.
voice mattered as well.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided that when I look at public health, I look at education, I look at access, I look at the
Mhm.
systems, And so I just tied it all together, and that's why I decided to do public health.
Mhm. Yes. And so you also decided to get a DRPH in public health, so a doctorate in public health. It's similar to the PhD. In my, I also have a public health doctorate degree. I have a PhD, but in my program, there were some people who were on the DRPH track, and we took essentially the same courses. So they're very, very similar. I'm curious, why did you decide to pursue the DRPH as opposed to the PhD?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me because they're like, I'm used to seeing a PhD. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, PhD is usually research based, right? And when you get into the DRPH, it just means that I'm a practitioner. So I'm not just
Hmm.
sitting behind the research, I'm actually out there doing the work as a practitioner. And then I
Hmm.
specialized in my track. I wanted to do advocacy and leadership. And then I did a few other concentrations under that. So to be able to take all the classes in public health, but I did like the fact that I can also specialize in a particular track.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's something that I was envious is too strong of a word. I found interesting about my DRPH colleagues when I was in grad. It seemed as if like they could really formulate their curriculum in a very unique and individualized way. Where us PhD folks, we had a much more like stringent set of classes that we had to take. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you kind of highlighted some of your work experience before you started your doctoral degree.
Mhm.
And I'm curious what, aside from wanting the credentials to back up the expertise that you already had from being in the field, what was the driving force? Like, was there an inspiration in your personal life? Was there a person who you knew who had a doctoral degree? Like, what was really pushing you? What were some of the other factors? Let me put it that way. What were some of the other factors that were pushing you towards getting a doctoral degree?
Well, I'm actually the first person in my family to have a doctorate degree. I think I have been lucky enough living in Boston, working in a lot of the healthcare organizations, to come across a few more people of color that was sitting with doctoral degrees.
Mhm.
And I knew for a long time that I was going to continue my journey, that the doctoral degree was going to be my ultimate degree. And I remember when I was pregnant with my son and I had to tell my dad, guess what? Baby girl's pregnant. I remember him asking me, so what are you going to do about your education? And I
Mhm.
said, I promise you that I'm going to get not just one degree, not two, but I'm getting three. And he said, okay. And so we're going to support you on that journey. And so
Mhm.
I always knew somewhere in me that I was going to do it. I was the kid that loved school. School came
Mhm.
easy. But I was also the kid that, even though I was talking a lot, I had actually something to say, So I already knew that that was going to be my journey. And then I think the more I read books, the more I exposed myself to Black women and to see certain women that had degrees. So I had to look outside more so than my
Mhm.
immediate circle. But
Right.
I knew that my ultimate goal was always going to be a doctoral degree. I think I
Mhm.
was just not sure as to what path that was going to
Mhm.
be or what area.
Okay. Okay. So it seems as if, like, at some point you were open to the idea because you talked about being a nurse practitioner. There is a doctor, I believe, a DNP, a Doctor of Nurse Practitioner's degree. So you knew you were going to get a doctorate in something. You don't know
And
what it was going to be, but you were going to get all the degrees in
yes,
something. So when you did decide to pursue public health as the field that you were going to specialize in and get a doctoral degree in, what were some of the things that led you to study at Capella University? Yeah, why, how did you decide that that was the best program for you?
Okay, so clearly I'm not the traditional college student, and that's okay because the
Yeah.
journeys can look different. I had gotten into Mass General's nursing program, the NP program, nurse practitioner program. I was one of what I think it was probably 72 kids, maybe. I mean, students at the time. And I think it was only me and another woman of color. So we really didn't see ourselves. And I remember being in that space. Maybe this is not for me. Like I wasn't
Mhm.
exactly sure if I wanted to still continue to be a nurse practitioner. I started, if I'm honest, I started to question the system that I was signing up for.
Okay.
And for me, because I'm very intentional about whatever it is that I do, I'm like, I didn't want to uphold this space, this degree, this career if I was still questioning certain things about it. So I think in that
Mm,
moment, I was really going through my own self evaluation and understanding. And I was like, yes, there's a place for traditional medicine, but I knew that I also had a passion for, alternative medicine. And so, how can
mm,
I, have these in the space? And then because I've always worked in urban populations, I was just so tired of just seeing or hearing, the high risk of everything about us, right? And still
yeah.
not understanding how to really deal with us, right? And only looking
Mhm,
at the chart to say, okay, so you
mhm,
have this symptom, that, so it must be this. And I'm like, no, no, no. What about all the other
mhm.
things that we hold in our bodies historically,
Right.
right? From many years and systems of trauma that we hold in our bodies on top of everything else that has accumulated over time. So I knew
Yeah.
that me just staying in healthcare traditionally was not it. And then I also knew that the rates of the Black health of especially women, um, is that it should be a public health concern. And then
Mhm,
how do we, start really practicing and implementing real education in order for us to be advocates for ourselves? So when I look
mhm.
at all the pieces, to me, public health made sense because of, the systems and looking at the population of the whole and figuring out ways that will improve, right? The larger group of people.
Right.
So I think that's what made me start going into public health. But like you said, when it comes to the research piece, you don't have that option to kind of specialize in anything. So
Mhm,
I knew that I still wanted to be a practitioner because that's what the
mhm.
nurse comes in. But I said, how can I create this my way of taking, the public health lens, right? Looking at
Mhm.
everything that affects the person and then
Right.
bringing in that piece that, systems try to forget about, which they have
Mm,
implemented and continue to create, is that piece of racial equity, right? Health disparities, all the
mhm,
things that come in there. And to me, the public health took everything I wanted to do and just put it into one. So that's why
mhm.
I did public health.
Yeah, I love hearing you articulate your story because it's so similar to how I was on the pre-med track. My journey happened a little bit earlier in my academic career because I was in college when my like medicine to public health mind shift happened, or mindset shift happened. So, I remember being in my like science classes and just being like, I don't care about molecules, I don't care about cells, I care about people. Care about people and I care about our people and I care about the various disparities. Why does it seem as if being black is a risk factor for everything, everything bad?
Everything.
And how do we make sense of that? And how did that even like how did we get here? And so I ended up kind of going the history of public health route.
Mhm.
But there's I feel like there are so many of us who we can address the problem in different ways. There's some of us who are called to be in the system, be in the healthcare system, delivering health and doing that
Absolutely.
in a different way. And there's some of us who are called to study it, so we can try to make
Yeah,
it better from the
I agree. Yeah.
outside.
And I think
Yeah.
because of my journey with having my son at the time and still trying to navigate, Capella became an option for me because I know you asked why Capella
Mm-hmm.
University. And that during that time when I did mines, that was the only option I can do while still being a mom, still working, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
give up on my dreams. And so
Right.
I'm like, listen, I still have to go and I'm gonna go. It might look different, but
Mm-hmm.
it still takes a certain kind of mindset to still do online learning. I always tell
Yeah.
my students now that if you want to learn, it doesn't matter the environment, you still have to do the work, right?
Mm.
And it takes more work when you are an online student because you don't have nobody over you
Yeah.
saying, oh, you got to
Right.
do this. This is the deadline. I remember those nights where you have to upload that paper by 11:59 p.m. or the system will shut you out. So there was
Mm.
no like, oh, let me just turn this in late. It was like, oh, it didn't accept my paper. Now let me reach out to the professor. So Capella worked for me in that instance, I think, because of where I was at in my life. And I still wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go to school, and I didn't want to just put my schooling on pause while I was
Right.
parenting.
Yeah, I appreciate you lifting that because some of the things that we've been talking about recently in the community, there are a good number of people in the community who are also parenting while they are pursuing
Mhm.
their doctoral degree. And that is such a unique challenge. It's one that I do not know about. I got pregnant right at the end. So I didn't like journey through the degree with having a kid, but or any kid or children. But one of the things that we've been talking about is that doctoral programs are fundamentally not structured in a way to support parents. Like they don't even imagine, most of them don't even fathom that students are could also be parenting. So when you think about class times or
Yes.
accessibility or
Yes.
childcare, providing childcare as part of the educational experience, it is so foreign.
Mhm.
And one of the statistics that I have come across recently, kind of just like researching about our doctoral outcomes, Black women tend to be older when we start doctoral programs. And
Yes.
when you're older, you're more likely to have children as you age. And so I've just
Mhm.
been, thinking really intentionally about how institutions can do a better job of one recognizing and then supporting parents,
Mhm.
doctoral students who are parents, because it's a very unique like levels of problems. I now that I'm a mom, I'm like, there's no way I could have done it. So
Listen,
I
listen.
champion and praise and
Yes.
just like shout out everyone who is able to go through our program while also parenting because woo, I don't know how y'all do it. I assume the
It
second I got pregnant, I like emailed or like the second I was, I felt comfortable sharing. I emailed my advisor and I was like, hey,
Mhm.
I need to
Mhm.
go like now. Like I
Yeah.
can't stay here anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot. And the way the system is
Yeah.
set up, right? We're not really thought about, right? If we
No.
keep
Yeah.
that mindset of the traditional student, then we're going
Mhm.
to stay stuck. Because what does the
Yeah.
traditional student really look like, especially now? And when we
Yeah.
stick to traditions a lot, it affects the woman more than anybody.
Mhm.
And then let's
Mhm.
add race into it, right? It affects the
Yeah.
Black woman at higher rates,
Right.
right? So we have to be very mindful of how can we still be on our
Mhm.
educational journey, right? And
Mhm.
still be able to
Yeah.
parent and take care of life, right? We're lifing, right?
Yeah.
And so how can we still do that? And I think because of my experience, because of understanding the importance of non excuse me, non-traditional systems and what
Mhm.
non-traditional looks like. I think that's
Mm.
why I make sure that I spend time or work in spaces for adult learners because it's important
Mhm.
to understand that we do exist. There's more
Yeah.
of us than ever. And that who says our journey has to stop. I tell my students who are adult learners, your journey was just on pause. And when you
Mm.
use that terminology, it doesn't mean that you can't, that you won't. It just means that you're just on pause right now, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that terminology and phrasing because you're right. I think that institutions like talk about the fact that the traditional student has changed, but actually haven't changed their systems and their practices and their structures to accommodate the
Mhm.
changing face of like what it means to be a student. So I love that you are championing and pouring into adult learners across the spectrum of the different work that you do. What were some of the highest points of your doctoral journey, and what were some of the lowest? So, like maybe one or two successes and one or two really big challenges. We love to kind of ask because it's a balance. So we love to ask you to reflect on a really positive element and then something that you overcame.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. Most of my experience was amazing, and I say that because I know this process can be so daunting. So, did I have a
Mhm.
challenge?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I did. Um, I'm gonna say the good part about it. The good
Okay.
part about it was I knew the support I put in place around me in order to start the process at first. There was two words starting with S that mattered to me, and it was support, selfishness. Because everyone's like, "What do you mean?" By selfishness, and then the success piece, the
Mm.
self care piece, the other stuff that comes after. And what I mean by that is when I was thinking about my journey, I had to make sure I had support because I had a small kid. I still had to try to
Mhm.
figure out how I'm going to do this and go. So I had that support system. So that part was positive. The sad part to that is that I lost people along the way, right?
Mhm.
Because and that's that big piece that I'm noticing when I'm mentoring women that are in the doctoral process is, oh my gosh, the relationship that I thought I had.
Yeah.
And it's like as you climb, sometimes people don't understand that commitment because you got to be committed to this
Mhm.
process. And there's going to
Yeah.
be some people that are not supposed to be a part of the journey, right?
Mhm.
And then you have to kind of grieve that loss of
Mhm.
certain relationships. So I think I
Mhm.
only lost a few. I didn't lose too many, so that part was good. The selfishness was about me, meaning I needed to, commit to this process to make
Mhm.
sure that I am focused and in it. So when it starts to get hard or difficult, that I know that I'm capable and able. Right. And so
Mhm.
that's the stuff I had to do. So certain people around me had to support that and me and making sure that my mindset was good. And I do remember at some point in that process, because of I think what my topic was, clearly racial health disparities and really getting into the history of
Mhm.
um, there was someone on my committee that wanted to change the terminology that I was using, right? Because I wasn't
Mhm.
using African American in mine, I was saying Black.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it got to the point of being like, oh, we want to change this to African American and do this and do that. And I was like, hold up, time out. This is my dissertation. You can correct me on, grammar. Did I do a run
Mhm.
on sentence? Did I cite something right? But you do not get to change my story, the context of
Yeah.
how I'm telling it, and then how I'm choosing to describe
Mhm.
my population of choice and the
Yeah.
population that I represent, which I'm using Black for a reason. And so in
Mhm.
that moment, I knew that that semester was already tough because I kept getting the paper coming back, redo this, redo that. I
Mm.
was like, no, sir, I'm not redoing nothing. So we need to have a meeting. We need to figure this out because I'm not redoing it. So I think in that moment, right, a little bit of like, am I going to have to pause now? Is this going to be a
Mhm.
problem?
Mhm.
But I knew that I needed to speak up then because that's just what I do. And even though I'm in this system, I was not going to sit back and let somebody else who was not of color dictate to
Mhm.
me what
Yeah.
my research was going to be. I'm the expert. I'm the lived experience person, right? And so that
Yes.
was the hard time was just staying true to what I wanted to commit myself to and be willing to deal with the aftermath that could have happened. And then the
Mhm.
good part about it is another good piece I should say is that at the end of it, when I did have to defend afterwards, everyone on the committee had said, this is the first time that we don't have a question of anybody
Yeah.
that we ever, sat on the committee for. And I said, okay. And they said, we just want to say, continue to lead, continue to be, open and honest, continue to say what you got to say. And congratulations, Dr. FeLisa Albert. So in that
That's
process,
amazing.
because of the support, right, that I had,
Mhm.
and then my mindset and then my selfishness, but in a positive way to say, I got to focus on this, I got to do this. And
Mm.
then knowing the power of my voice. And in that
Yeah.
moment, I said, if I let them change my thinking and my writing, then they will continue to be able to do that, whoever the theys are, right?
Mm.
And so I said,
Mhm.
no, I'm an expert and I'm gonna start being an expert now.
Mhm.
And so that was the only small piece. Now it sounds amazing right now, but trust me, in the process, I'm tired. If you send that paper back one more time telling me I got to rewrite it or do something, I was just like, I was just through. I was just like, we're not doing this. So yes, that's that.
Yes. Something that I think that I have noticed as a trend, and this is all just anecdotal evidence, but now that I've spoken to maybe like 70, I think we're up to like 70 Black women and non-binary folks with doctoral degrees, I feel like a trend has emerged where people who have worked before they do their doctoral degree, regardless of their age when they start, if they have
Mhm.
substantial work experience, they seem to be a bit more confident about themselves
Yes,
as an expert. And one of the things
100%.
that I really struggled with is I did not have that confidence. I had, it's so funny, like I had advisors who were like, or people on my committee who also wanted me to use African American instead of Black. And I had to write, like I'm remembering, I can like see it on the page, the portion
Mm-hmm.
of my dissertation, like the 3 paragraphs that I had to insert in order to explain why I was using the word Black and why I was
Mm-hmm.
capitalizing the word Black at that. But I
Okay.
didn't have that confidence. I didn't have that confidence to feel like I actually like know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to push back. And I
Yes.
think that part of that comes with maturity, as well as when you are working, like you're responsible for a whole thing. You know that you are the expert at your task with the specific thing you do for work. And I think that that power dynamic that exists in
Mm-hmm.
academia is a little bit easier for folks who have a bit more work experience to navigate than it is for folks who don't. So, and I think that that's
But
something that's come up so
I,
far.
yes, I fully agree. I do. I think so. I think we come in just with a little bit more like, no, I have a little bit more
Yeah.
footing in this area. And I
Hmm.
think my nursing piece, because I was nursing for like, close to like 10 years at the time.
Hmm.
So I know my stuff and you're not going to make
Yeah.
me change it. But in my head, but I've always been that person. My parents always told me when I was small, I was like that. I'm like, well, why? Like, why I got anything. I can be anything. So it shows up. And I was like, in that
Hmm.
moment, nope, we're not doing it. Because this is
Mm.
the beginning of me being an expert, excuse me,
Yeah.
and standing on my platform, right? And
Mhm.
being rooted and solid into what I believe. And so to me, that was the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. So now let us transition to you're finishing up your doctoral degree, you're about to defend. How are you thinking about your next steps? Because you were working throughout your degree, did you, like, as soon as you got your degree, did you get a new job? Did you strategize beforehand? Like, how did you kind of pivot from Dr. FeLisa, who doesn't have a doctoral degree and is working, to Dr. FeLisa, who has and is now going to work? So, like, what was that shift for you?
I think the shift, it was not quick for me. It wasn't like I went right into a doctoral position like the next day. Like, congratulations, great. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm working,
Mm-hmm.
in this area. I think
Yeah.
for me, I like to I like to be present in everything that happens in my life and don't rush through. And
Okay.
so because I was still I had a great back end still in nursing and healthcare. I was still teaching. So I still felt um I was still in a good position where I was not rushing to get into
Mhm.
anything. I knew that in that moment, I took time to make sure that whatever space that I hold, that I need to be true to myself. I wanted to be
Mhm.
true to my research, right? I wanted to be true as being a Black woman who has a doctorate. And there's a difference with that, right? Because I wasn't leading
Yeah.
with my ego now that I have a doctorate. Like, oh, I'm here, I
Mhm.
have arrived. I'm like, no, I had arrived before, right? So I was
Mm.
very mindful of that. And I was very mindful of not being used now because I do
Mm.
have the letters.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so mine's, I think I was mindful in everything I did, but because I was already teaching, it was an
Mhm.
easy thing to say, okay, well, now you just got to add doctor to your name since you're already teaching at this point. And then
Okay.
I was already consulting. So I think
Okay.
because I was doing a few things before I got the doctorate that I just added on to it. And then I think I
Mhm.
became a little bit more intentional about certain areas that I was going to speak in or team up with, more
Mhm.
so than ever. So I think I was more cautious and conscious once I got
Mhm.
mine. Hmm.
Okay. Interesting. I'm gonna ask a question super out of left field, but it's on my mind for a reason that I won't get into right now. But
Hmm.
since you are already working, you were already not just working, you were already teaching and consulting, which are two, lines of work that a lot of people with doctoral degrees hope to get into, like, when they
Hmm.
start. Like before they even start, people often envision either I want to teach or I want to do independent research and do independent consulting. I'm curious, and if you don't want to answer this, we will just completely wipe it. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you, and if so, at what point did you reconceptualize your salary expectations for your teaching job as well as your consulting rates net, like with the additional letters. And why I'm asking this is because um I've also been reading lately, I've been doing a lot of research lately, but I came across a statistic lately about the additional earning potential. I came across a statistic recently about the additional earning potential of people with doctoral degrees, but like in the fine print, realize that that earning potential, the additional like $1 million over our lifetime, doesn't apply to Black women. And so I feel like there's this like idea that a lot of us have that I'm going to get a degree and it's going to help me earn more. And I'm just curious how that played out for your life, if that was immediate, and if that was an internal decision, if there were external forces. I would love if you could possibly speak to
I love that the question came out of left field, because when we're having real,
that.
right, real conversations bring up like
Hmm.
real aha moments, or like let
Hmm.
me ask. And when I said I was going to be here, I'm fully here. So I'm gonna answer any and everything that comes out of left field. Um, I think, yeah, we do think this money's going to come right in and I'm going to be able to get
Hmm.
this. And in
Yeah.
my experience, that has not been the case. Um, it is still to me taking time
Hmm.
to really say, okay, so the
Hmm.
numbers are now huge, right?
Yeah.
As far as the pay. I think what I had to do, I weighed, did I want the money immediately? Because living in Boston, we
Hmm.
are the mecca of education,
Hmm.
health. We're here.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I had to weigh, did I want to fit in? Do I believe in what you're selling
Hmm.
in order for me to get my money? Or am I going to work someplace that, yes, I know it's not the high pay as this other elite institution, but am I able to stay true to myself? Am
Hmm.
I able to make sure that I am being the change and providing the service that I said I wanted to
Hmm.
provide and not
Yeah.
outside what people think I should be doing? And then how can I turn around and start consulting and start building to start making,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
money, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like I had to put this in my head, and this is just me. No place, no job, no nothing is ever going to pay me my worth, right?
Mm.
Because I'm not going to be bought, but I still have to pay my bills and you're not going to disrespect me with your pay. Right. And so sometimes I think for me in the beginning, I was like, okay, I got to do this. And now let me get this side job and do
Hmm.
this in order to try to still make,
Yeah.
some money. And that's still
Hmm.
where I'm at now, to be honest. Like
Hmm.
I'm still like not where I really want to be, but I'm not
Hmm.
doing bad. And so I
Yeah.
think as time move on is having the conversations about how can we really hire each other, right? Because we
Hmm.
know that
Yeah.
that's true. Like I look at some contracts and I'm like, wow, you willing to pay them that, but you want to nickel and dime me, and no, we're not doing that. So right, so we still got a lot of
Hmm.
work to do
Yeah.
within our own group as to bringing us in and paying us. But no, it was not the money that I thought I was going to be making when I came out.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. But I
Hmm.
just have
Yeah.
figured out how can I still have both worlds and continue to grow. Hence the reason why I started putting more time into my company so
Hmm.
I can
Yeah.
start trying to fill in the gaps. Did I answer the
Right.
question?
You absolutely did. And I really appreciate the transparency. And I feel the same way in that I thought, I just like thought immediately that getting a doctoral degree meant that you would now be a six-figure earner. And it's just like not, not at all the case. I don't know why I thought that and like where I got that idea from, but I really just like thought that that was gonna be my life afterwards. But I also appreciate the words that you shared about not being disrespected by the pay, but also knowing. You kind of phrase it like you know that nothing is ever going to pay you your worth because you're not going to be bought, and I just love that phrasing. Love, love, love. So you started to
Absolutely.
talk about your consulting work, and so I wanted to ask you about Well Equity Partners. So you founded this during the pandemic, and it seems like you kind of had like a aha moment. How do you envision Well Equity contributing to wellness, conscious living, and soul healing specifically for Black communities?
Ooh, I know just the words I choose, right? Well, it's funny because well equity, yes, came during the pandemic. Before well equity, I've been consulting since 2000 and I think nine or something along the way with me doing
Hmm.
the racial equity work, especially while my son was in independent
Hmm.
schools and trying to navigate
Hmm.
that system. And so I
Yes.
was like, the whole racial equity education, we're not having that with my young Black male. You are not going to do a lot of the things. And so that's when I really started consulting and getting paid to come in to do things at various places. But my first company was named Visionary Consulting Group. And so that's where we kind of stayed into that area. And I knew at some point um, I was going to go back to or pull more in on the women's health side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still the person that treads lightly with accepting a lot of like jobs and can you consult, can you consult, can you consult. I'm like, no, I got to check in with myself and my self-care to see if I can take that
Mm-hmm.
on. So I
Right.
think during the pandemic, I'm looking at the totality of everything, right? Not just COVID itself, but what COVID actually represented, what it brought to the surface. And I used to tell everybody, do not waste this time. Because even though the
Mm-hmm.
time was so dark and blue, there was still a reason for it. And there was still a message that hopefully a lot of us was getting out of it. And that is to self-evaluate, look at things. Are you where you want to be? Where you trying to go? But to me, more importantly, was the health and not just the
Mm-hmm.
physical piece, but the emotional, the mental piece. And even though we've already been struggling at large numbers, but COVID just magnified some
Yep.
things. And so that's when I said, okay, it's time to do a shift and kind of now create this platform that when you pull up my website, you know that I'm a proud Black woman. Everything
Mm-hmm.
about it reaps Blackness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reaps I am my sister's keeper kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the importance of centering ourselves in everything that we do.
Yeah.
During that time, we know that Black women was hit
Yep.
very hard. So whether you was in the workplace, you had to stop
Mm-hmm.
working and to start back, watching the kids. Whether we're single moms and you lost jobs and you're trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do at home with these kids and they still trying to learn. Like
Mm-hmm.
the list goes on. But
Mm-hmm.
as always, it affects the woman first and
Yep.
then specifically the Black woman. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do we still come out of this, right? And get on the other side of it, and then the anxiety and everything. So that's what made me really look at well equity. So how can I bring both of my worlds together
Mm-hmm.
and really be intentional. And so during that time, I'm like, I worked with a few people. I brought some more people like to partner with me to make sure that, I don't like to use words just because they common words like, yeah, we want to do holistic this and that. But when you look at people's systems and structure, it's not holistic. And so for me,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, so I have my educational coach, what is it? Education leadership coach. I have my licensed clinical social worker. You have me with the other background of the health, and then still with education and racial equity, and bringing it all together to say how can we, show up and do the work, and then continue
Mm-hmm.
to partner with others that are not scared. I'm gonna say scared, or maybe have gotten comfortable with doing things based off of what their organization wants them to do and to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we stay comfortable while doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are at a point now more than ever that we have to stand on our beliefs, we have to lead boldly, right? And we have to be honest about the truths.
Yeah.
And until we do that, right, it's still going to look the same. And so I knew that the people around me and understood my mission and what I wanted to do. And so I feel like this was the best time to have the real hard conversations that people didn't want to have. And at the end of the day, we know that all the isms that we deal with, all the disparities that we deal with, is that race is at the root of it.
Yeah.
And when we choose to go outside of that, that's when we still stay in that circle. So I know you talked about racial equity. We kind of being in the same world. So we know that, race is at the center and then what intersects race,
Yeah.
right? And then we can look at all the pieces that go. But if we stay scared with this race piece, then, we're going to sit back still dealing with anxiety and depression. And I can't change this system and all the stuff that we want to happen. So I think for me, well, equity allows us to deal with the person and give them power to say, what can you do, what can you change? So for me, I always tell people, in whatever space I hold, I'm free in my space. And they're like, what do you mean you're free? I said, no, I'm free because it's a mindset first, right? And then I show up to like who I really am. I don't code switch. You're
Mm.
going to know that I'm a Black woman, not just a woman. So don't tell me that you don't see my color because you do. Um, but then when I'm in that space, I let those know that any form of racism ism will not happen on my watch when I'm in the space.
Mm.
And everyone that knows me knows that if you in a room with Dr. FeLisa, the little microaggressions,
Mhm.
macroaggressions, something that you say that you're like, oh my gosh, did I really offend? Oh, I didn't know. It's not happening on my watch. And so to me, that has nothing to do with the bigger system and fighting that battle. I'm talking about what I
Mm.
can control and how I show up in the space, right? And so
Mhm.
the more we do that and have ownership, right, and
Yeah.
accountability. So I put in the energy of myself and what I can control. So I'm like, whatever space I hold and share, I'm going to be authentic, I'm going to be true, and it's just not going to happen on my watch. And I'm
Mhm.
making sure that when my Black women are not in the room, that I'm supporting them as if you was in the room. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've been really focused on. And to me, that's the well equity piece, while at the
Mhm.
same time making sure that you are good, right? Deep
Mhm.
down, like, and that you are conscious, right? Because we're in these spaces and we're not conscious as much as we think that
Yeah.
we are, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure that we're conscious and really looking at real things so we can
Mhm.
just get better and take care of ourselves. Because there's a
Mhm.
lot of depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
like all the things now more than ever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're holding these degrees though, right? So I always say, at what cost?
Mm.
Right? So
Mhm.
we have to start taking care of ourselves better. So we can
Yeah.
have both, right? I can still be healthy, but I can be healthy Dr. FeLisa at the same
Yes.
time, right? So
Yes.
how do we do that, right? And so that's why I'm so passionate about well equity.
Yes. You were speaking all of my languages. um, I something I really appreciate that you kind of highlighted in the effort to make systematic change around racial equity. I do think that we often ignore or kind of like glance over the individual kind of like racialized interactions that people have. So I really appreciate that you were like, what we not gonna do in this here is
Yeah,
any kind of, oh, I didn't know, like we're just not gonna do it. I really appreciate that because I feel like sometimes in big corporations, even maybe like smaller companies, we get so focused on like we're trying to undo our principles
right.
and our practices, and we're looking at our policies and how to be anti-racist in our policies. But it's like,
Yeah,
okay, you can be anti-racist on paper, but like on the day-to-day interaction, what are we
no,
doing?
100%. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you said that, and I just need to jump in there because
Mhm.
when we really start removing it from the systems, right? Don't get me wrong, right? We got
Mhm.
to pay attention to that too, but we all can't be doing the same thing, right? We're needed in all areas. So people need to pick their area, right? And say, this is going to be the area I'm going to focus in and stop trying to
Mhm.
fix everything. Because I believe
Yeah.
that when we're doing our work in purpose, right? That we will focus on that area. So I know what my area is. I'm on the front line, right? I'm that
Mhm.
one. I'm more like the Renaissance kind of person. I'm on the front line. I'm in your face. This is what I'm empowering. And then those that want to be like, okay, so we're going to deal with the policies. So there's so many systems. But in the midst of that, my job is I want to make sure that you are here to see
Yeah.
reap the benefits of what you're putting in. I want to make sure that that you're here longer, right? I
Yeah.
want to make sure that you are whole and present and conscious, right? In the midst of
Yes.
that. So we can continue to get all these positions and do this work, but I keep saying, but at what cost? Because there is a
Mhm.
cost, right? And I
Yeah.
always say, I'm not going to pay with my mental health, my self care, none of that. I'm not paying that cost for that. So that's why I
Mm.
say I'm able to show up with the energy of being free and showing what that looks like while I'm still
Mhm.
doing my work and still be able to rest at the end of the day.
Yes. I love that. And I think so many of us need to hear that, whether we already have our doctoral degrees and I feel like we can't not do racial equity work. Like we have to. Like there's no choice to
It's
like not do
requirement.
racial equity work.
It's like it's fun, honey. Because at some point,
Yeah, it is a burden that is unfortunately placed on us by our existence. As Black
absolutely.
women. So it's a responsibility. Let me not use the word burden, but I think wherever people are on their journeys, whether they're a current grad student or they're already finished, there
Mhm.
is we are living in a time where there are so many different pressures,
Yeah,
like never before. And
yes,
it is of paramount importance for us to take care of ourselves because it's not worth it, as you have reminded us. It ain't worth it to do the work if you're not here to reap the benefits. And there's so many stories of us crumbling under the weight of
humbling.
the world because we're not taking care of ourselves
Yeah,
or because we have underlying health conditions and we're not getting medical care and medical treatment for
absolutely.
those, whether they're mental health conditions um,
Mhm.
or otherwise. So I appreciate you bringing all of this to the forefront, and I'm excited for folks to hear this and remind themselves that they need to be selfish. I need to start using that word a little bit more in my life.
Absolutely. As a wife, as a mom, all that stuff, like you still
Yeah,
have to prioritize you. I tell
yeah.
people, "Don't nobody love me more than I love me. I love me
Mhm.
some me. And I show that with how I treat myself, what I say
Yeah,
yes to, the spaces that I'm in, and then the people around me get to reap the benefits of that, of me being whole and happy and rooted and
yeah.
centered.
Yes. So, so good. So, I'm curious, what is one thing that you would do differently if you had to
Ooh.
do your doctoral degree all over again for some strange, weird reason? What is one thing that you would do differently?
Maybe I would have connected an outside piece to it more. Outside, what can I say? Ooh, I think an outside mentor. Because I'm gonna be
Hmm.
honest with my journey. I remember when I first talked about getting it, I was at an event and I remember clearly this Black woman said to me, "Oh, you're married?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you might lose your marriage behind this because it's a lot of work." And I was like,
Mm.
"Lies? Like, you're not speaking that into me or not?" And so I remember me saying, "Okay, so let me just keep my little group that I have around me and I
Mm.
can do it,"
Mm.
because I didn't have that that full blown Black woman mentor to guide
Mm.
me through that
Yeah.
process. If I could have had that, I think that would have been great, and not just for any Black woman, clearly, right? Because she just
Mhm.
told me that my marriage wasn't going to last. So it has to be somebody
Yeah.
that is positive, confident
Mhm.
that this is possible while managing other things, right?
Right,
So if I
right.
could have had that,
Mhm.
that would have been nice. Now
Yeah.
I got that when I was almost done. I had,
Okay.
a couple of mentors at that point. But in the beginning,
Okay.
I didn't have that. So I
Mhm.
think because I didn't have that, that's why I want to be that,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
that's I know the
Yes.
importance of that piece. So
Right.
yeah.
Same, same, same. Ditto to it all. And then finally, what is one piece of advice, just one piece of advice that you have for current or prospective Black women or non-binary doctoral students?
Oh, this is big for me is to be present. Good, bad, the tough times, you tired of writing, you are stressed, the voice is saying you can't do it, still be present in that whole process. Do not check out. I can say when it got tough, I was still present with that because that made me stronger, right? That is something that I can now apply and be able to share with others when they're in that space, right? I think that whatever we go through, there's reason and purpose behind it. We might not know in the moment, but it matters later. And when you are conscious, you're able to get on the other side of that to understand
Mm,
why you needed to go through that. So I think me, because I am conscious like that, I can always say there's nothing about that process that I do not respect that happened with me, to me, for me, because it was nothing but growth. So be present.
yes. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. FeLisa, for that amazing piece of advice and great reminders to be present, to put ourselves first,
Mhm,
to dream big, to
mhm.
make sure that you collaborate with other people. We didn't have time to get into, I wanted to, yeah, we didn't have time to talk about the way that you collaborate with others in your consulting work, but I want to highlight that for folks who may have missed that part during the
Yeah.
interview. But thank you so much for joining us on the Cohort Sisters podcast and sharing your story, your journey. And I know that you are continuing to do the work every single day, and we celebrate you for that. And thank you for that.
Thank you. It was worth every bit of it. Continue to do great work.
Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of the Cohort Sisters podcast. If you are a Black woman interested in joining the Cohort Sisters membership community, or you're looking for more information on how to support or partner with Cohort Sisters, please visit our website at www.cohortsisters.com. You can also find us on all social media platforms at Cohort Sisters. Don't forget to subscribe to the Cohort Sisters podcast and leave us a quick review wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we'll catch you in next week's episode.